Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Great Scott! There's no crying in baseball!
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
This is where the fun begins.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That's right, we're ranking The Damned. The Damned is a 2024 but released to the United States in 2025 international folk horror film. Set in 19th century Iceland, a young widow named Eva must decide whether to rescue shipwreck survivors, and this is a choice that leads to haunting consequences for her isolated fishing community. Now, not exactly the strongest start to 2025. I decided that though this movie came out in 2024, it was only released in the United States in 2025, and I only count the movies that I count the release date as when I could watch it, so I could not watch it in 2024 unless I lived in a different country, so it doesn't count for me. So this is a 2025 movie for me, and it was the most popular box office wise that was released in 2025, but it really wasn't that popular in the box office. It was a movie that I honestly thought had some decent potential, but it was fairly disappointing. Let's get into it by talking about the 10 essential aspects of a movie. First is plot. Does the movie follow a comprehensive story arc and is plausible within the world that has been created? I thought the plot of this movie started out good. I was actually interested in it, and I was interested in the world, I was interested in the story, and when it came to the shipwreck, I thought all of that leading to the shipwreck and just after the shipwreck was all interesting. But as this movie went on, it just got worse, and the plot of this movie may have been interesting in the beginning, but it just did not have the substance to fill an entire movie. And this is a fairly short movie, and it still just did not have enough. I would say like halfway through this movie, I was already kind of done with it. I was bored, and I knew what was going to happen. It fell into this really just bland pattern of horror movies that just wasn't really that good and relied a lot on jump scares, so I didn't like that. I also did not like the ending. I didn't think the ending made any sense. I don't know what they were really going for, but I was so uninterested by the end, I didn't really care that much, and then they had this ending that was like, okay, yeah, that was terrible. So the plot of this movie started out good, but it just didn't have enough to carry out through the whole thing. Second is attraction. Does the movie have an interesting premise with a high entertainment value? Honestly, not really. Like I said in the beginning, it did have some sort of substance, but as this movie went on, it just didn't have anything that good. So the only people that I think are really going to enjoy this movie at all are avid horror fans, people that just watch horror because they just enjoy that genre, period. You're probably going to like it. It did have some horror aspects that were good, some suspenseful aspects, but honestly, if you don't like horror movies really that much, this one is not a good enough standard to pull you in to watch this movie. I can't suggest it even to like psychological fans because it is somewhat psychological, but it's just not done that well. So I think the only people that are going to enjoy this movie, that this movie is going to be attractive to, is horror fans. Third is theme. What message or truth is the movie trying to convey? Now, I thought this was the strong point of the movie. This is what kind of carried the plot. And the theme of this movie is the psychological effects of guilt. It is about the decision that our main character has to make at the beginning of this movie and how that decision affects her psyche. I enjoyed that part. That was a good decision on their part. It was the thing that drove the plot. It did get more boring, and I thought it was somewhat surface level. I wish they would have gone a little deeper and maybe done something a little different with the theme, but I thought it was a good one to choose. Fourth is dialogue. Is there a real feel to the conversation? Yeah, the dialogue is good. It's good enough. It's serviceable. It doesn't do anything amazing, and it's not terrible. It just kind of is what it is. I mean, these characters are convincing that they know each other or that there's some tension between each other. The acting along with the dialogue kind of go together, and I thought the dialogue complemented some of the acting. Fifth is acting. Are the characters convincing? I thought the acting was good. Like I said, I kind of paired dialogue and acting together because they really complement each other, and it was serviceable just like the dialogue. The acting was good enough. It was good enough to put you into the scene, to allow you to believe that these characters are real, but there's no real moments where I'd say any actor or actress had the chance to really show how good they were, but they definitely did a good job at not blowing it. They didn't do a bad job in the acting. It was just decent. 6 is cinematography. Is there a creative use of lighting, setting, and wardrobe to convey emotion? Yes, the cinematography was decent, but there's really not much emotion. I mean, it's a horror movie, so most of the emotion that you're supposed to feel is fear. And I think that being suspenseful is a lot more effective at making you feel fear or just scared rather than a lot of jump scares. And that's what this movie did. It had a good atmosphere. I enjoyed the setting. I thought they made it feel very cold and very isolated. It was something that I enjoyed the environment that they were in, and it was cohesive to making some suspenseful moments. And in the beginning they were there, but as it went on, they just kind of went from these spooky, eerie moments to just jump scares all the time, and that totally ruins it for me. That doesn't make it scary at all. I hate when movies do that. It just wasn't really that effective, and it made the movie boring as it went along. 7th is editing, and this is all about the pace of the movie. The movie is an hour and 29 minutes long, and honestly, that was too long for a movie. This was so boring, and I can appreciate that they didn't go any longer than that, but the plot just did not have enough substance to carry this movie along. I was bored by like the 40-minute mark of this movie, so I wish it was shorter, but I can appreciate that they didn't make it any longer than it was already. 8th is soundtrack. I actually thought the soundtrack of this movie was pretty good, especially for a horror movie. Soundtrack is pretty important. It can really add another layer to this movie. Now, this movie didn't have very creepy music, but I thought the music that was in it was actually good. It didn't feel very cheap. It felt like somebody actually put time and effort to make good music for this movie, and I did enjoy it, but unfortunately the rest of the movie just kind of didn't live up to allow this music to kind of stand out and elevate the movie. Instead, it just kind of, it was like the couple moments that I enjoyed was when the music came on, but then when it left, it was back to a movie that was just kind of boring. 9th is directing. Now I feel the director is in charge of the previous 8 aspects. They're the ones that have to put it all together, give it their stamp of approval, and make a good movie. Now, the director of this movie is Thor Paulson, and this is his first movie that he has directed. And you know, I think there's some promise there. It's a very mediocre movie. It's a movie that didn't have things. I mean, there's some things to complain about just because it's somewhat boring. The idea wasn't quite fleshed out enough, but there are definitely parts of this movie that have potential. I enjoyed the soundtrack. I enjoyed the way the environment was, how it looked in the beginning, how he portrayed how cold it was. I enjoyed all of that. So there was definitely some positive aspects. I'm just kind of curious what else he could do. I don't think that horror is necessarily his genre. I think he could probably be more creative going into something else, because all he did was just use jump scares. And so if he does make something else, hopefully if it's horror, I hope he kind of focuses more on the suspense aspect. But yeah, this is not enough to judge whether he's going to be a good or bad director, but right at the moment, he's fairly mediocre. 10th is time. Will it stand the test of time? I don't think it will stand the test of time. It's not that good of a movie. There's a ton of horror movies out there, and you either have a really, really good horror movie and it stands out because it's scary, or it's so bad that it's funny. Unfortunately, this movie is right in the middle, so I don't think it'll be remembered for really anything. Now for the review section. Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it a 90. The audience gives it a 47, and IMDb gives it a 62. Now, 90 is crazy. I don't know who watched this movie and thought it was just amazing, but 90 is way too high. 47 and 62, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I think this is like a mid-50s, like 55 to 60 range. It's just a very average movie that has some things that I like and some things I don't, so it really just falls right in the middle. It's just a boring, forgettable movie that it had potential to be better, but really just kind of fell flat. Finally, for the rankings. For the year of 2025, it is the first movie of the year, so it's going to be first in entertainment and it's going to be first in cinematography. For the decade of the 2020s, out of 34 total movies, it is going to be 26, just below It Ends With Us and above Nosferatu. It's in that category where I would never choose to watch this movie again, and honestly, I would probably never suggest anybody watch these movies, but I do have it below It Ends With Us. That is a movie that is just a little bit easier to watch. I would prefer to watch it because there are moments that I enjoy because it is a romance movie, and though it falls flat in certain parts and is frustrating at certain parts and the dialogue is kind of wonky, it's just an easier topic, an easier movie to watch than something like The Damned, which is just a mediocre horror movie. But I do have it above Nosferatu, and that's really, honestly, that is the runtime. This movie is way shorter than Nosferatu, and if I'm going to suffer through a movie that is mediocre, then I'm going to want one that is shorter. Now, for cinematography, out of 34 total movies, it is going to be 25th, just below Twisters and above Venom: The Last Dance. Now, I have it below Twisters because that movie, I just feel it's more of a complete movie. It's a movie that didn't have anything that really made me upset in any way, and it didn't have anything that was great. But it just did a good job with what it was trying to do, which was just be an entertaining movie, but it did it well. Where The Damned, I had problems with it. The plot was really boring. It drug on. I thought they could have done much better. So when talking about representing film, I would rather give you a movie that is going to be not have as many mistakes and just execute. Maybe it doesn't do anything great, but it just executes better than a movie like The Damned. Now, I do have it above Venom: The Last Dance, and that's just the seriousness of the movie. Though the plot suffers because it gets boring, the dialogue is good, the acting is good, the music is good. There's a serious tone to the movie, and it's done fairly well. It just is dragged down by the plot. There's things that like piss me off about Venom: The Last Dance. It's a movie that's supposed to be funny that I didn't find funny at all, and it didn't hit at all in any sense emotionally. So it's just a movie that I think executed better than Venom: The Last Dance. Now, all time, out of 46 total movies on the entertainment side, it is going to be 37th, just below It Ends With Us and above Paranormal Activity: Ghost Dimension. Now, these movies are really similar between Paranormal Activity and The Damned, except it's just The Damned is more serious, and I enjoy that. Paranormal Activity is a little cheesy. I don't even know which Paranormal Activity that is. It's so far down the line that it's just repetitive and boring, where The Damned had somewhat of a plot idea that was unique and interesting, though it kind of fell flat throughout the movie. I just would prefer to watch that rather than like the cheesy Paranormal Activity movie. Now, in cinematography, out of 46 total movies, it is going to be 36, just below Christine and above Venom: The Last Dance. Now, I have it below Christine because Christine, though it is cheesy and it's not great as far as a horror movie goes, there is some interesting character development in that movie. I think the plot continues to be more interesting throughout the movie than The Damned, and I think there's some interesting cinematic aspects. Though Christine is kind of a low budget, low quality movie, it does a lot of things fairly interesting or well, where The Damned I just feel like it has less there. Especially on the character development side, it's very boring and plain and just follows a very typical horror movie track. Where I feel like Christine, though it did that, I thought the main character's development, the psychological development and change, was just more interesting and represents film better in some way. Alright, now that's all I've got for The Damned. If you have not seen this movie, I would not suggest watching it, but if you have, then let me know your opinion. I'm kind of curious if anyone thought it was better than where I had it. If you're interested in somebody who does the exact same format as me, but has a very different opinion, then just go watch my buddy Bosso movie reviews. He does the same thing where he ranks it against movies that released in the same year, decade, and all time, except he just has a very different opinion. I feel like I enjoy the cinematic aspect a little bit more. I think he enjoys the entertainment side more, so go check him out if you're interested. But otherwise, comment a movie that you want me to review and ensure that you subscribe so that you can watch me review that movie. But otherwise, I'm Mr. Majoritarian. Stay classy, San Diego.